Texas, it got to a point where there were no substitutes. Some school districts, even in Texas, were asking parents to fill in that gap.
Abby Asekun! Abby is an education enthusiast with a goal to improve and elevate education in Africa, one teacher at a time. She is the executive director of 1 Million Teachers Cares and the director of the Nigeria-Canada Trade Investment
Parents
Group.
became teachers. In a country that is considered the global leader of the world, we still have situations where, schools, depending on what neighborhood or area that you're in, don't have good libraries in their school, don't have, good teachers. And I showed an example of what she posted on LinkedIn was these kids were sitting on the floor essentially.
Before we let the stories of the past shape your future, it would mean the world to me if you could follow us or subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to us. Enjoy the conversation.
So, without any further ado, Brandon, let the stories of the past
shape your future on the
Quoting Life podcast.
I know that you are the executive director of 1 Million Teacher Cares, which is this program for teachers in kind of these underfunded, undereducated areas that might be in areas of conflict, and you provide the teachers with these training resources to build them up. Can you kind of go through it with me a little?
Yes, so we have two organizations. So we have 1 Million Teachers. 1 Million Teachers was the first to start. So they provide the training, resources, the platform. Actually, it's registered in Canada. They're out of Kingston, Ontario. So we have a really great relationship with Queen's University and, just a great tie with Canada. And so they provide the training, the resources to teachers. So we primarily have teachers in sub-Saharan Africa. And again, in places where, again, under-resourced, marginalized communities. And from 1 Million Teachers, which is really a social enterprise and ed tech startup, we created 1MT Cares, which is a short for 1 Million Teachers Cares. So we are the non-for-profit side of things. And my job really is to look for funding and get funding so that teachers don't have to pay to get onto the training platform. And they can get a lifetime access to the training and resources. So we work hand in hand together between 1 Million Teachers and 1MT Cares. We're really tight at the hip, and both our mandates is really to help ensure that teachers get the best quality training and development throughout their career. And that in turn will help support students in class in terms of, better learning deliverables to our students, and also to help support in areas of conflict, especially where there's opposition for girls to go to school, where these teachers have the right tools to help them be able to navigate that kind of terrain where we're trying to get more girls in school, get more girls educated. And just for the teachers to have an opportunity to be confident and be effective, and to want to wake up every day and go teach. Yeah.
And do you have a story behind this inspiration or motivation to help others? Do you have something that possibly stems from your childhood that turned you into the person you are today?
I think it's a multitude of things. Right from when I was in college, like I said, I went to University of Saskatchewan. I've always been interested in teaching, so I started out as a Sunday school teacher at church when I was in Saskatoon. And till today, I'm still a Sunday school teacher. I teach 3-year-olds, and I've always wanted to give back. I had the privilege and opportunity that my parents were able to send me to good schools through elementary and secondary school. I went to private school, and then I went to university in Canada. And I never lacked. And because I was a girl, um, my dad did not put my brothers over me in terms of education. We all got the same quality education. So it's always been a passion of mine in terms of teaching and with kids, especially. And then I found the CEO of 1 Million Teachers, Hakim Zubair, by chance online, and I saw the things that he was doing in Africa, and I reached out to him, and I said I wanted to meet with him and hopefully be a part of this organization. And that was in 2019. And here I am in 2023, and I am running the not-for-profit side of things for him. And yes, and really making an impact, not just in Africa, but really trying to make an impact in the world.
Yes.
There's
And
something interesting that you say there because growing up, you say that you've naturally developed this love for education, which I find interesting because, quite frankly, I look at my sister or I look at my friends as brothers, and they don't care that much about school. And then I'm also in a program at my university where we teach entrepreneurship in Kenya. And on a contrast, these people are so interested in education. And I'm wondering if you've observed those differences as well with the youth of our days not being as interested in traditional education, and yet other parts of the world are um, like doing everything they can to get an opportunity like that. So I'm wondering if you've observed that difference yourself, and what do you think about it?
Yeah, yeah, and I think honestly, I'm very in tuned with my environment, and I grew up, like I said, in a fairly middle class environment, so no issues whatsoever. But I was still very in tune with the poverty that surrounded me in Nigeria. And my dad worked really hard, in his career and what he was doing, and he always made us know that they worked really hard for the money and the comfort that we had. So you take that kind of environment where you see poverty every day around you, and then you're instantly put in this other kind of environment where it's everything is kind of at your beck and call. You don't have to worry about power. You don't have to worry about water. You don't have to worry about bad roads, and you're put in this kind of like environment, a university where there's thought processes going around and there's leadership, and the young people are made to have critical thinking, and you just in an environment where you can thrive. And like quickly, that really kind of dawned on me that, oh my goodness, I'm far better off than a lot of people back home. And this is just not in Nigeria. I'm talking about Africa as a continent. So that self awareness was there from the very get go. And it was always just, how do I take, after all these years, and like I said, the privilege that I've had to have a really good education, and as a girl, as someone from Africa who is, black, to be able to thrive, and for my education to be at the forefront of everything that I'm able to accomplish. How do I take that and translate that back in terms of giving back? And I really felt that, sometimes when you think about all the things that are happening in the world, life is really not fair. You kind of say, where do I start from? How can I make an impact? And I had that overwhelming feeling too, as well as like, where do I start from? What do I do? How can I make an impact in my country? How can I make an impact in my continent? should I be making an impact here in, when I was in Canada, or should I be making an impact here in the US because now I live here? So there were all those things that, I toyed with and I thought about every day. But when I got a chance to connect with Hakeem, from 1 Million Teachers, it was like this light bulb kind of like went off. Like, this is me. This is my passion. This is how we can, when you band together, so you're not working in silos, which sometimes we tend to do. Now that I'm not, I can band with someone, collaborate. We can be a group, a team, and then use that opportunity to really make a bigger impact than I could have possibly done. But to go back and answer also your question, Adam, the youth nowadays, it's very different. The life now is different. Back when I was in high school and even in college, social media wasn't there the way it is right now. The connection, the the interaction globally is so different now as it was before, that you may feel like you are in Nigeria, but you could be in Canada in terms of your connection with people. And so I think we do definitely have an opportunity with the youth, the younger generation, to really showcase the impact of education, because I think sometimes people take it for granted, especially if you've grown up in developed countries, and the access to things that you may necessarily take for granted, and not realizing that in other parts of the world, that is a complete luxury, for them.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and Abby, I noticed your earrings. It's showing like the continent of Africa.
Yes,
Are those the colors of the Nigerian flag as
yes.
well? Okay, yeah, that's really
Yes.
that's
So
really cool.
our flag is green, white, and green. That's the colors. And so I'm very passionate about Africa. Like I said, I'm Nigerian. My kids were born here in the US, but if you ask them where they're from, they'll tell you Nigeria. I think it's really important for us to showcase our culture, our just our heritage. It's really important, for me, and then it's what drives me every day, because um, there's so much that we need to do in the continent, and if we can get Africa right, it really does help the world. And if we can get education right in Africa, if we can get education right in Nigeria, especially Nigeria being the largest in terms of population in the continent, if you can close that gap in education and looking at innovative ways to educate, you're going to be solving a lot of the problems in the continent, which filters into the world too as well.
Right. And I know that when you described meeting the CEO of 1 million teachers, you described it as a light bulb moment. And I'm wondering, how do you meet people that give you these light bulb moments? How did you meet Hakeem?
Um, so it's very um, it's very connected to the other organization that I support, which is the Nigeria Canada Trade and Investment. That started with my dad. So again, I have this relationship with Canada, and we had a summit, an international summit back in 2018. And again, it's all about trade and investment between Nigeria and Canada in different sectors. So in 2019, I was very adamant about doing something with education, in the education sector. And so I do have a good relationship with the Canadian Embassy in Nigeria. So I follow them on Twitter, all the social media platforms. And there was something they posted between, Hakeem had gone into the country to Nigeria with some professors from Queen's University, from the Faculty of Education. And they were just talking about, what 1 Million Teachers was doing in terms of, teacher development and training. And that's how I reached out to Hakeem, actually, because of that, because I actually wanted him to come to our summit and hopefully be able to speak at our summit in the education sector about what he was doing and how we can leverage that kind of collaboration between Nigeria and Canada in that education sector to really develop the opportunities that Nigeria needed or Africa needed to grow in that sector, but also for Canadians to also see what Nigerians were doing in the education sector too as well. What can they take back from um, our own curriculum and our learning modules that they could use, in Canada too as well. So that's how we connected back in 2019. Hakeem did speak at our summit um, with some other stakeholders in the education sector from both Nigeria and Canada. And from there, we just became really close. He started kind of bringing me on some of the projects that they were working on and trying to see if, anything would gauge my interest. And like I said, once I got to know him and just what they were doing, and even just the opportunities to really create the impact and scale up, like I said, that light bulb went off. Like, I could really have a place here to help support the team and really make an impact in Africa.
There's something really interesting you said when you were talking about the continent you're from, and you mentioned how a lot of the problems there could be solved through education. And I was thinking, even here in North America, some of the problems we have, I'll say, we can go back to the problem of racism, let's say, in the United States or in Canada. And a lot of it, I think, comes down to simply people not being knowledgeable enough about the topic, right? I think a lot of discrimination in this world comes from simply not being knowledgeable in that sphere. And so I'm wondering if you think most of the world's problems can actually be solved through quality education.
Honestly, like I said, I live here in Texas. In the U.S., education is still it's still one of those sectors we know is important. Teachers are important, but they're still very much underpaid. Even here in a country that is considered the global leader of the world, we still have situations where, schools, depending on what neighborhood or area that you're in, don't have good libraries in their school, don't have, good teachers. Teachers are burnt out. We don't have adequate teachers anymore, especially after COVID, the stress that a lot of teachers went through during the COVID period and now post COVID. A lot of teachers, at least I can't speak for Canada, but I can speak, for the US. A lot of teachers have left the profession, which has left um, a big gap in the education system. I know, for example, in Texas, it got to a point where there were no substitutes. Some school districts, even in Texas, were asking parents to fill in that gap. Parents became teachers because we had no teachers, we had no substitute teachers too as well. So education is the foundation for any economy. You cannot grow as an economy, as a country, if you don't get education right. And it is something that even when I was at the UN General Assembly last year, there was a summit called the Transforming Education Summit. I mean, that was a key thing that was brought on, from the leaders at the United Nations, is that we need to get more countries to really put education as a priority. Up until the little things, like it's not little. I mean, feeding during, like in Texas during COVID, students, no matter your economic background, everybody got access to free meals, so you could eat breakfast and lunch for free. Then post COVID, now it's gone back to, you have to apply, you have to be at your family income has to be at a certain um, financial threshold, to qualify for free or reduced, expense on meals. And for some parents, that is like life or death, and they have to kind of think about it like, can I afford to pay, breakfast at my kids' school is $1.95 in the morning, and then lunch is like $3, 25. But for some parents, that's a lot of money, and if you're just at that threshold that you didn't make it because you earned maybe a couple of hundred more dollars, and but you're really struggling, that's enough. Like, the kids don't have access to good meals. The my partner at church, who helps me to teach, she works in the lower income, area, and she says that some of her kids, once they have lunch, that's it until the next day when they come back to school. So when they're able to eat breakfast. So, little things like that are really big things, when you kind of take a look at the global or universal concept of education. So it's not really just about the teachers or or class. It's a combination of a lot of things. And you go into some schools. I mean, in Nigeria, there's some schools with no chairs, no tables. I know of a lady that I saw on LinkedIn, and that's her project that she's working on, trying to get funding to be able to build benches with tables for kids to be able to sit in class. I was showing my husband the other day, her project, and I showed an example of what she posted on LinkedIn. Was these kids were sitting on the floor, essentially. There were no tables, no chairs. They had books on their laps, and that's how they were learning. So you have this varying spectrum of education inadequacy. So how do you get kids like that who don't even have chairs to sit on to learn? And then you have maybe kids over here who have chairs to sit on, but they don't have access to food to be able to learn properly. So if you can't get all those things and get it right and fix those things, how can any economy thrive? How can we say we want to go to the moon? How can we say we want to explore, more innovation, new ideas, if we can't fix the fundamental, which is education?
Yeah. I think your perspective really, it kind of dawned on me how much like people might be lacking in some areas where a lot of the things we normally take for granted. And I know you're trying to help out with these initiatives. Do you have any long-term goals that you may see for 1 million teacher cares? And are there any ways the general public can help you out?
Yes, I mean, we're always looking for obviously funding, and on our website, 1mtcares.org, people can go in and donate. You can go donate, from like US or from Canada or from anywhere really. And it's amazing to get on our training platform. It's $150 for a teacher to get on the training platform, but it gives you lifetime access to training. And so we've heavily subsidized, what it would cost. But for a lot of teachers, $150 is a lot of money that they just don't have access to. And so that's why I work really hard to ensure that we get good funding so that we can get more and more teachers onto our platform, to give them the opportunity to see education in a different light and see modes of delivery of education, and become more innovative in the way they deliver education to young people. And then how do we get young people, kids and adolescents who are out of school, how do we get them back into school? And then what does the role of the government play in ensuring that they're putting enough funding there in the public schools so that children can go back to school? So I mean, our lofty goal was, you can even hear from 1 million teachers, is to train 1 million teachers in sub-Saharan Africa and beyond, through our program, and really just give them the the skill set, to be able to thrive and be leaders. We have, and when you go through our training, there are different tiers that you get to. And so we have some teachers who are black belt teachers, and we have one in that has that is doing absolutely well. She's also working with, the government in Uganda now in terms of education because of just what she's been able to do, and through the 1 million teachers training platform and the resources, to really empower her to really make an impact in her community. We try to get these teachers, to look at uh, their counterparts globally, and see, even with competitions and stuff like that, at that level, for them to be exposed to that so that they can see and how they can better themselves. And we've had really great partnerships. For example, HP is one of our biggest partners right now, and we collaborate with them in terms of, digital literacy for our teachers, mentorship programs that we've collaborated on with them. And then we have another partner, Girl Rising, which is out of New York here, and they're focused on, the girl child, and education, and leadership and empowerment. So we collaborate with them too. So how do we get more girls back in school? How do we get more girls not just to go back into school, but to finish school? And then how do we get more female teachers, into the profession? Because a lot of these young girls see themselves in the teacher. So if we can get more female teachers to get into the profession, then we can have more girls, who aspire to want to get educated and to do more things for their community. So, I mean, we want to train as many teachers as possible and get as many kids into school and finish school, especially in Africa.
Yeah, that's a really ambitious goal, 1 million teachers. And it's really crazy how
Yes.
you're like trying to tackle it. And I know that like impacting 1 million teachers will impact so many more children. So I think it's a really wonderful target. I'm also really fascinated by your participation in the Nigeria Canada Trade Investment Group, as it kind of expands beyond kind of just education. And correct me if I'm wrong, but kind of international relations kind of seem like forming friendships where they can be like mutually beneficial and you're helping out one another. And I'm interested as to what are some sort of barriers that exist in this bilateral trade between Nigeria and Canada.
Um, so right now, I think the biggest thing that we have, so I think it's a couple of things. So first of all, I think there's that opportunity. So let me take this back. Canada is in close proximity with the United States. So there's a lot of trade between Canada and the United States that sometimes Canada doesn't have to go and look far and beyond. You can just go to your neighbor in the South and you're good. And so that's been one thing, that I know Canada is trying to diversify itself, in terms of trading, looking at other countries. So that's, one aspect. The other aspect too comes from what people get to see and read in the media. So Nigeria, okay, we have, issues going on. Yes, issues in the northern part of Nigeria, with terrorism and stuff like that. So sometimes it's banned that don't go to Nigeria, stay away from Nigeria. And rightfully so, you have to be very careful, if you're going to go into certain places and to do business. So you already have that, and people's perception of what that country is. And I'm not just talking about Nigeria, I'm just talking in general, what sometimes the media portrays out there. So it makes it, you already have that barrier from people. And I have to say, Canadians, I lived in Canada. Canadians are a very conservative, very, as much as they love to explore and, experience new things, they're very conservative, and maybe something that might take, like the US could probably jump on quickly. Canada takes its time. They do their due diligence, they do the research, and before taking action. So sometimes that could be a barrier in terms of when we need to maybe move a little quicker. Canada is just a little slower in terms of just by nature, just being a little bit more conscious, before, jumping the gun. And then I think those are like some of the, like I've said, some of like the, big challenges that I see. But there's been more and more. I know, like the Canadian embassy in Nigeria, especially the the Trade Commission section that deals with trade, has really been, working really hard to really foster that, bilateral relationship between Nigeria and Canada, and really fostering that trade and investment opportunities. And again, it's not just looking at, you know, Canada coming to invest in Nigeria, but how can Nigeria also invest in Canada, and how can we collaborate also with trade? And when I talk about trade, I'm talking about across all sectors, including, education. So, for example, I'm working with Queen's University in their Smith School of Business, and they just signed a contract with the Pan African University, which is in Nigeria. Their School of Business. So we're actually going to have the first study tour from Nigeria, from the Pan African University, uh, into Canada in August. They're going to be in Toronto uh, for a week, a study tour, and just really learning a lot about Canada, doing business in Canada, trade and investment opportunities, and different things like that. And then hopefully next year, the plan is for to have Smith School students do who are in the executive MBA program go to Nigeria. So again, starting to really take those little steps that will hopefully create that ripple effect, so that you start with Smith School and Lagos Business School, and from there, more and more institutions, and even organizations will start to want to work together, collaborate, and whatnot. Yeah.
Wow, it's really cool, like seeing your work come into fruition. I can't wait to see like where your work might take you in the future. I think it's really cool. And uh, UBC Solder is also open to partnering with Nigeria, students of UBC Solder. So thank
Oh, really?
yeah, we're from Solder, so it'd be really cool to have you like also on the West Coast as well. So I guess that's something you could consider.
No, definitely. Even when I was in Canada, I never went to Vancouver. It was just one of those provinces that I just never got to go to, and I don't know why. And then after I left college and I was in the US, I was like, why? I had so many friends from Vancouver. I'm not sure, why. So, I mean, we're always looking at different opportunities and different people that we can like partner with, in terms of just expertise, resources. We rely on professors and students.
Hmm.
For example, at Queen's University, at the Faculty of Education, they're final year students, which they call student teachers. And so these are the teachers that are going to go, within a year would, end up teaching. They go with 1 million teachers to Africa every year for their alt prac, and they spend about 2 to 3 weeks there, and they go to different countries and they learn about their education system there, their training for the teachers, the students. And what I'm talking about, they go from being in the city to really remote villages, and it's something that has been done every year for the last 5, 6 years, and the students love it. The institution loves it. And it just kind of opens, more opportunities in terms of collaboration. Once they go and they come back, we debrief and look at, some things that we could do better, some things that maybe can go into the training modules. And we also rely on the student teachers. So even before they go for the practicum, they have, virtual, meetings with some of our, 1MT black belt teachers, just kind of collaborating and talking about, just the different, differences in terms of education in Canada, and then as well as, in Nigeria, and not just in Nigeria, but all the teachers from the different parts of the continent, and then just opportunities, that we're looking at. And something that we're actually really, working on to right now is like our training program is in English. But Africa is not just English. We have the francophone countries and the lusophone countries too as well. So we are trying to also see how we can take our programs or modules that we have, and at least translate them into French, so that we can reach more of the teachers in the francophone countries. So so again, we're every day we're looking at opportunities and looking to how to better our programs and our support and our resources. And we welcome more and more institutions to be a part of our cause. And we think that we can do better when we band together rather than working in silos.
And as a tradition on our podcast, we like to share a quote from our previous guest to you and get your thoughts on the quote. So the quote is, "Integrity is key to building your personal brand." What are your thoughts on that?
I think that's spot on. You have to have integrity. You have to have people trust you, trust what you're doing, and be very transparent, right, about everything. So as a not-for-profit company, one MT Cares, and we are considered tax exempt under the eyes of the IRS here in the US. We do everything with integrity. We're very transparent. We spend most of our funds really directly supporting our cause, which is for our teachers and for our children in schools or who are out of schools that we're trying to get in. So I think once you have that integrity, what you're trying to do will really shine, and more people and organizations will want to support that because they can really see what you're trying to do, and I want to help you make a difference.
Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. As a growing channel, it would be so amazing if you would take one more minute of your day to reshare this episode on any platform you're liking. Hope to see you next week.